What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and today I wanted to talk about mouse and keyboard versus controllers in Call of Duty, specifically in Call of Duty Warzone. And at the end of the video, I'll also go over a little bit about whether or not you might want to switch to controller before Black Ops Cold War comes out. Real quick before I start, go check out my Twitch channel. It's in the description down below. And also don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment on what else you guys want to see. So mouse and keyboard versus controller has been a pretty hot topic for a long time now. We've seen this topic come up a lot more recently because a lot of games are moving towards full crossplay. The big game that really brought crossplay more to the forefront was Fortnite. Now, there were definitely a lot of games that did crossplay before Fortnite did, but Fortnite was the really big game that brought it really into the spotlight. And this pushed a lot of other game developers to get crossplay into their games too, and that includes Call of Duty. Now, Call of Duty is pretty unique because it has been a pretty prevalent esport for a really long time now, and we all know that the CDL is entirely controllers. The CDL has been played on PlayStation for years, but for the upcoming 2021 season, they're switching to PC, but they're still going to be using controllers. So obviously, controllers are pretty ingrained in Call of Duty, and that carries over into both Warzone and crossplay. A lot of people make the assumption that mouse and keyboard is better than controller, but if you look at the numbers of certain aspects of Warzone tournaments, that may not actually be the case. Obviously, aim assist is a huge part of why controllers are so successful, but you don't really have to look at the impact aim assist has on playing the game to realize that controllers are probably a better choice in a game like Warzone. But that's like the most important part, right? The aim assist. So you're probably wondering how we can ignore aim assist and the impact that it has on the game and just look at these other numbers as to why controller is better than mouse and keyboard. We don't have to look at the direct impact of aim assist because we already know that aim assist works. And the way that we can tell is by looking at tournament results from past tournaments in Warzone's lifespan so far. I have tournament results from some smaller end tournaments and some of the bigger tournaments that you've probably heard of. And I looked at the highest placing teams and looked at the input they were using when they placed highly in these tournaments. These placings range from first place to essentially the top 4 teams in these tournaments. One of the smaller prize pool events that I looked at was CLX Uprise, and because I do cast those tournaments, I get to watch these guys play every single week, and this tournament is what kind of got my ideas going for this video in the first place. And some of the bigger tournaments that I looked at include the MFAM Gauntlet and the Chipotle Challenger, both the first and the second one so far. Of these tournaments, I found the top placing teams in each one, and of those teams, which sometimes consisted of 2 players, sometimes consisted of 4, of those players that I could confirm what their input was, 35 of them were using controller, while 5 of them were using mouse and keyboard. Now that number is ridiculous. I know that this is kind of a smaller sample size, but when you're talking about these high-end tournaments with some of the best players, you don't really have a huge pool of players to choose from anyway. Once you start getting into the results of more and more tournaments, you start realizing that the same players are winning over and over again. I noticed that once the list was going up to around 40 plus players, I started seeing repeat names over and over again, so I don't think it was really necessary to go much further than this because I'm just getting the same people over and over again. And also because I kind of thought that it was unfair, but really, it really isn't that unfair. I didn't include Call of Duty Pros because clearly they're going to be using controller no matter what because they've been using them for years, but they should absolutely be counted in this too. And of these top finishers, I only counted 1 of the Call of Duty Pros, and there were 3 more at least in those top teams that I saw. So that could even push these small numbers that I have to 38-5 rather than 35-5. And again, those are only the pros who have formed teams that were good enough to compete in these events. You obviously need at least 2, even up to 4 really, really good players to compete in some of these events. So not all COD Pros might be able to build teams like that, but I do feel like if they were to put up decent teams and put a good effort into these tournaments, I think that we could see a lot more of those controller players really dominating. So is this really a good conclusive way to state that yes, if you're playing Warzone, you should be on controller if you're trying to perform the best? I think yes. I think it's a very good way to say that. If you're trying to compete at the highest level in these kill race tournaments, you're going up against players just like this who are some of the best that you've ever heard of. And most of them, like a staggering majority of them, are using controller over mouse and keyboard. And yes, I know that there are a lot of really talented players out there who use mouse and keyboard who don't compete in these Warzone tournaments. But regardless of that fact, most of the time that we see right now with the best players coming into these tournaments, a huge majority of them are using controller. And sure, you may be thinking about like the best players, like the top end, like the CSGO pros coming over and trying to play in Warzone to try and compete in those events. But we see a lot of times we have really talented controller players winning these events, even despite having a lot of talented mouse and keyboard players playing against them. And some of these players, including people like Aiden and Nick Merckx, they have won tournaments in other games too that also have a big controller base. And that's also why I kind of wanted to look at the lower prize pool tournament like CLX Uprise, because we have a lot of players come through there that are slightly below that top end level, but some who are still even on the edge and sometimes even just into that top end level of players. Most of them are using controllers too. So there are definitely a lot of really good mouse and keyboard players competing with them. And if we take out the top end mouse and keyboard players and also the top end controller players, you're left with a tournament like CLX Uprise. And again, a huge majority of those players and the winners of those tournaments and the top end placers in that tournament specifically all use controllers. So with all this information, if you're somebody who's going to be trying to compete at the highest level of either Call of Duty or just Warzone in general, and you have the option between controller or mouse and keyboard, specifically in Call of Duty, I think that a controller is the much better option. So what about for Cold War? Basically what I said before kind of applies. If you're trying to compete at the highest level, then definitely switch to controller and try and get used to it now, because controller is going to be a huge part of Call of Duty, probably forever. And again, if you're trying to compete at the highest level of Call of Duty and Warzone and even Cold War events, then controller is definitely going to be the preferred input method of the majority of top-end players. Now, if you're someone like me who's probably not going to be competing in anything high-end anytime soon and doesn't really want to either, I used to play on controller all the time growing up when I played the older Call of Duties, but I've since switched to mouse and keyboard and I'm much more comfortable there. I tried to go back to controller, and while it does feel kind of crazy when you catch the aim assist and it just tracks somebody perfectly, using a controller is just not as fun to me as using a mouse and keyboard. So for my specific situation, I'm not going to be switching to a controller because I don't enjoy it as much and I don't need to. But again, if you're trying to compete at the highest level, we've consistently seen these high-level players lean towards using a controller over mouse and keyboard because it provides them with a better opportunity to win. So I know I didn't go too much into detail about aim assist itself, but I feel like just looking at these tournament results and seeing what these high-end players tend to usually go towards, I think that's enough to show you that generally in a game like Warzone, using a controller is the better option when you're trying to compete at the highest level. So that's it for me, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, just going over a little bit about mouse and keyboard versus controller and looking at different placement stats based on the input that these players are using. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you want some more stuff like this, and leave me a comment telling me what you enjoyed, what you didn't, and what else you guys want to see. Thanks for watching, guys.
No, what a slide. No way, the worst slide ever. Ugh.